What would you do if the most dangerous man you've ever loved walked into the room and you were 7 months pregnant with his child? Nora had one rule: he could never know. She built a new life, a new name, a new version of herself. But Lucien Moretti didn't build a criminal empire by letting things go. And the moment he saw her across that clinic room, 6 months of hiding meant absolutely nothing. Welcome to this channel, where we tell stories about powerful men undone by love, families forged in fire, and the impossible choices that reveal who we truly are. Here's what this story quietly teaches. The people we run from the hardest are often the ones we need to face the most. Like, comment your thoughts, share this with a friend who loves a complicated love story, and subscribe, because the next story is already waiting for you.
"Come in," she called out, expecting her doctor. But the door opened, and Lucian Moretti walked into the room. For a second, her mind went blank. It could not be him, not here, not after 6 months of constant fear and careful hiding. But it was him. He wore an expensive dark suit, and his jaw was tight. He looked harder, as if the past few months had sharpened all his edges. Their eyes locked, and the world seemed to stop. "Hello, Nora." His voice was smooth but held a tone of pure steel. Hearing her real name felt like a slap. "Get out," she managed to say, her hands trembling. "Get out right now." Lucian's eyes dropped to her belly, and a storm of emotions crossed his face before it went blank. When he met her gaze again, his eyes were ice. "How far along are you?" "That is none of your business." "How far along?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. This was the voice he used right before the violence. She knew it well. 28 weeks, she answered, knowing a lie was pointless. She watched him do the quick math in his head. His hands tightened into fists. "It is mine." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact from a man who knew exactly when he had last held her. Nora's silence was all the answer he needed. "You have been hiding from me for 6 months," he said softly, "carrying my child. And you did not think I had a right to know?" "Rights?" The word was sharp. "You lost any claim to rights when I discovered what you really are." "And what I am," Lucian said slowly, "is the father of your baby. What you are is a criminal, a killer. I saw the files, Lucian. I know what you have done. I will not let my son grow up in that world." "Our son?" he challenged. "No, my son. Mine. I am the one who gets sick every morning. I am the one who lies awake at night terrified, wondering if I am strong enough to do this alone. You do not get to just show up and claim him." "I did not know because you ran away," he shot back, his voice rising. "I woke up and you were gone. No note, nothing. That one of your possessions had escaped?" The bitterness in her voice was raw. "You were never a possession to me." "Then what was I, Lucian? How could you build an empire on other people's pain?" She had been willfully blind, and now she hated herself for it. But she wouldn't make that mistake again, especially when it came to her son. "He's not just yours to protect. He's mine too." When she had left him 6 months ago, she'd found his secret files. She saw the pictures, the reports, the violence he ordered as casually as other men order coffee. The man she loved had never really existed. He was just a role she had been too foolish to see through. Lucian claimed she knew nothing, that the files were taken out of context by his enemies. But Nora didn't care about his excuses anymore. All that mattered was giving her son a normal life, far away from him. The words hit Lucian, and his fury shifted into something much darker. "Do you really think I will just walk away from my own son?" he asked quietly. He stepped closer, the scent of his expensive cologne a ghost of better times. "You are about to learn what happens when you make the wrong choice." Her heart pounded. He wasn't just threatening her, he was stating facts. "You're carrying my son," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. That makes you mine, and I protect what is mine. Nora insisted she didn't need his protection, but he just scoffed at her new life, a cheap apartment with flimsy locks in a city where no one would notice if she vanished. The only reason you have been safe, he revealed, is because I allowed it. The blood drained from her face. He then listed every mistake she had made while trying to escape. She used her real social security number to rent the apartment. She kept her old phone for 3 days, giving away her location. She withdrew cash from an ATM, leaving a clear trail on security cameras. He smiled without warmth. I knew where you were after the first month. I've known for 5 months that you were alive and safe. The room began to spin. Then why did you not come for me? She whispered. Because I was angry, he admitted. Angry enough to let you think you had actually gotten away. But that was before I knew about my son. He pointed out that she was 28 weeks along, which meant the baby was conceived when they were still together. This child, he said, is proof that you were mine. Defeated, Nora finally asked, "What do you want?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "I want to go back in time, back to when you still trusted me. But since that is impossible, I will settle for making sure my son is born safe and knows who his father is." She tried to negotiate, suggesting supervised visits in public places. He looked at her as if the words themselves were disgusting. "He is my son, and I will not let him grow up thinking his father abandoned him." "It is better than him knowing what you really are," she shot back. The words struck him like a physical blow, and a flash of real pain crossed his face before it turned to stone. "You do not get to make that choice for him," he said. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. "In about 2 minutes, 3 of my men are going to walk through that door. You can come with me willingly to have a civilized discussion, or they will carry you out. The choice is yours." Her blood ran cold. She knew he meant it. Lucien Moretti had built an empire by crossing lines that other people would not. Taking the mother of his child from a clinic was nothing to him. The fragile freedom she had cherished for the past 6 months was just an illusion he had permitted. Desperate, she suggested a coffee shop 2 blocks away. "A public place," she pleaded. He considered it for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. But if you try to run—" He did not need to finish the sentence. As Nora gathered her purse with trembling hands, she felt her entire world crumbling into dust. The ultrasound pictures, her most guarded secret, were on the counter. She reached for them, but Lucian's hand was faster, covering the images. He stared at them with a painful intensity. With one finger, he gently traced the outline of their baby's profile. "He looks just like me," Lucian whispered. She wanted to deny it, but what was the point? "He is mine, Nora. Nothing will change that." Running was no longer an option, not with a part of him growing inside her. Defeated, she said quietly, "The coffee shop. It is 2 blocks west." He knew the one. Of course he did. The walk through the clinic felt unreal. They passed pregnant women and their partners, all lost in happy thoughts of baby names and nursery colors. To everyone else, they were just another couple. If only those people knew the truth. Outside, the cold October air was a sharp reminder of the normal life she could never give her son. Not with Lucian in the picture. He fell into step beside her, his tall presence a familiar and unsettling comfort after 6 months apart. People moved out of his way on instinct, sensing he was not a man to be crossed. "You look healthy," he said, breaking the silence. She did not respond. "I need to know you are taking care of yourself. And the baby." "I am fine, Lucian." "I always worry about you," he admitted, his voice rough. "You were never just another person to me, Nora. You were everything." He stopped her, his grip gentle but firm. "For 6 months, I tried to hate you for leaving. I told myself I was better off, but then I saw you in that clinic, pregnant with my child, and I knew I had been lying to myself the whole time." Her throat was too tight to speak. This was the Lucian she remembered, the man who could be brutally honest about his feelings. "It does not matter," she finally managed. All that matters is our baby grows up safe. His voice held a hint of real pain. And you think I cannot keep him safe? My own son? I think your world is built on violence, she replied. I know what happened to Vitelli's daughter, Lucian. I know about the kidnapping, the ransom. I will not let that happen to my child. She saw the shock on his face. How do you know about that? I found the files, she said. The ones you kept locked in your office safe. She had spent 3 sleepless nights reading about the man she thought she loved, his empire built on violence. Those files were encrypted. Your password, she said, the words tasting like ash, was my birthday. An icy fury settled over his features. You think you know me from some papers? Murder is not a business transaction. Sometimes it is, he stated coldly. Sometimes you must do terrible things to stop worse things from happening. And you get to be the judge? She asked, stopping outside the coffee shop. He met her gaze without flinching. I protect what is mine. You wanted honesty, Nora. I have killed people to keep my world safe. But you were the one who chose not to look too closely, who accepted the gifts without asking where they came from. The accusation hit her hard. Because it was true, she had chosen to be blind. You are right, she conceded. I was ignorant, but I will not let my son pay for my mistakes. He looked exhausted, the power draining from his face. Can we please just talk? She looked at the father of her child, and for the first time saw the man underneath. Fine, she said. We will talk. The tiny table felt like no barrier at all. Lucian finally broke the silence, asking, When is the baby due? Nora answered, Around January 15th. He noticed her weariness. You're working retail? Someone has to pay the bills, she said, a bitter edge to her voice. I didn't want your money then, and I don't want it now. She saw fresh scars on his knuckles, signs of a life she had run from. He leaned in, his eyes intense. I'm not going to take him from you, Nora, but I will be his father, in every way that matters. In the middle of your criminal empire? She shot back. I'm getting out, Lucian stated, the words hanging in the air. Nora stared, sure she had misheard him. What? I'm getting out, he repeated. I have been working on it for 3 months, selling off illegal operations and cutting ties. It is not easy. People see it as a betrayal. He looked exhausted, admitting, There are debts that must be paid in ways that do not involve money. Why would you do that? Nora asked, completely stunned. Because I am 38 years old, and I am tired, he said, his voice raw. And because you left. Then I saw you today, pregnant with my son, and I realized I have a chance to be something different. She felt a flicker of hope, but guarded her heart. Words are easy, Lucian. You have to prove it. His hand covered hers across the table. I will. For him. For you. So I can be the kind of father he deserves. Then we do this my way, Nora declared, pulling her hand back. You can visit, but we meet in public. No threats, no control. He simply nodded. Agreed. On one condition, you stop hiding. Just then, the baby kicked, hard. Nora gasped, and Lucian's eyes flew to her belly. Without thinking, she took his hand and placed it on the spot. As the baby moved again, Lucian's breath caught. The hardness in his face melted into pure wonder. That's my son, he whispered. He looked up at her, and in that moment, she saw the man she once loved, a man willing to tear down his world for a chance to be a father. The realization that she might still love him was terrifying. Nora quickly stood up. I should go. Lucian offered his wallet. Let me at least help with the bills. Absolutely not, she snapped. The moment I take your money, you will think you own me again. I never thought I owned you, Nora, he said quietly. She was tired, the fight draining out of her. How did you find me today? She asked, changing the subject. Lucian's face became carefully blank. I have people who keep an eye on you, just to make sure you are safe. Nora felt a chill. You have been stalking me. I have been protecting you, he corrected, his voice low and serious. The world I live in does not stop being dangerous just because you left it, model. My enemies will use anything I care about against me, and that includes you and this baby. The words made her feel sick. He continued, I told my organization we ended things badly. To them, you are ancient history, but that does not mean you are safe. Now that I know about the baby, everything has changed. I have to protect you both while I tear down an empire. Nora collapsed into her chair, suddenly weak. This is all insane. You talk about criminal empires and danger like it is just another Tuesday. For me it is, Lucian said. I was born into this world. My father was a soldier in this family. I learned early that power is the only thing that matters, and weakness gets you killed. I did not choose this life, it chose me. That does not excuse what you have done. No, he agreed, it does not, but it explains it. And maybe you will understand why I cannot just walk away. A part of her wanted to run, to go back to her safe apartment and forget this ever happened. But she saw the man she once loved underneath the monster. So she looked at Lucian and said, Tell me, why is it so hard to leave? He stared into the distance. When you build power like mine, you create a web. My people rely on me for their safety and their jobs. Hundreds of innocent people work for my businesses with no idea what I really do. The politicians and judges I own all depend on me to maintain the status quo. So you cannot leave because too many people need you? I am saying if I walk away, a power vacuum is created. And in my world, that is always filled with violence. There would be a war on the streets. Everything I built would burn to the ground on the evening news. He looked older than she had ever seen him. I have to do this carefully, transfer power, and protect the people who depend on me. I have to make deals with law enforcement so this does not end with everyone in prison or dead. Deals with law enforcement? You mean the Federal Bureau of Investigation? He admitted it was true. Cooperating with the feds goes against everything I was taught, but I will do it if it means my son gets to have a father. The Lucian she knew would rather die than become an informant. But she was realizing the man she knew was never real. How long have you been planning this? She asked. 3 months, he said. Since July. I woke up one morning and realized I was 40 and alone. The average lifespan for a man in my position is 50. I decided I did not want to die that way. I did not want to spend the next 10 years waiting for a bullet. So you were getting out before you even knew about me or the baby? Does it matter? He asked. Does it change anything that my reasons were selfish before they were about you? She did not know what to say. Maybe it was better that he chose this for himself. A decision made for self-preservation was probably stronger than one made from love. What happens if you fail? She asked. What if someone decides they want you dead? Then I die, and you disappear, he said, as if talking about the weather. I have set up everything for you. Money, new identities, and people who will help you vanish. If I fail, you and our son will be safe. You cannot talk about dying like it is nothing. In my world, death is always a certainty, he said, taking her hand. But I will do everything I can to make sure I die decades from now. I've shown you I'm not the man I used to be. His thumb gently traced circles on her palm. I will be the best father I can, and I'll respect your boundaries, hoping one day you'll stop seeing me as the enemy. But even if you hate me for the rest of your life, I will be there for our son. That is not negotiable. Nora stared at their hands, feeling crushed by the impossible choice before her. She could keep fighting him, or she could take a terrifying leap of faith and believe that people can change. I need time to think, she said at last. Just a few days. She pulled her hand away, suddenly feeling cold. 6 hours ago, my life was simple. Now you are here and I cannot think straight. Lucian nodded. I can give you a week. But he waited for her to meet his gaze. Do not run again. Whatever you decide about us, decide it here. What could possibly go wrong? His expression was ancient and tired. Everything. The world I am trying to escape does not let people go easily. There are things happening that I cannot fully control. If you are in danger, I need to get to you fast. Fear tightened its grip on her stomach. Are you saying I am in danger because of the baby? I am saying the risk was always there. I am just being honest about it now. He stood, his eyes scanning the coffee shop with practiced caution. I am assigning security to your apartment. You will not see them, but they will be there. His voice turned to steel. You can hate me for it, but right now, you need protection. Pride was a weak defense against the danger he described. The baby kicked, a reminder that her choices were not just about her anymore. Fine, she said softly, but they stay outside. No one follows me or reports on what I do. Agreed. He typed a quick message on his phone. It is done. The speed of his actions was both impressive and frightening. I should go home, Nora said, standing up. I will walk you, he replied. I want to see where you live and make sure it is secure. The idea of Lucian Moretti, a former crime boss, worrying about her apartment security was almost funny. But his concerns seemed real, and she was too exhausted to argue. It is a 10-minute walk, she said. They left the coffee shop and stepped into the orange and gold light of the setting sun. College students rushed by, living simple lives untouched by the kind of impossible choices Nora now faced. Tell me about the bookstore, Lucian said, his question sounding surprisingly normal. It is a small, quiet place owned by a 70-year-old woman named Margaret. We sell mostly used books, and she hired me without asking too many questions. I like it there. It feels safe. She glanced at him. I know it must sound pathetic to you, working for minimum wage in a dusty old shop. He finished her thought without judgment. When you could have been living in a penthouse, spending my money. That life had strings attached, Nora. You were right to cut them. Were I? She asked. It feels like those strings never broke. They just got longer. He had no answer for that, and they walked the rest of the way in silence. Nora thought she had finally found a safe place. The neighborhood was quiet, with tree-lined streets and families walking by. It was the perfect escape from the world she desperately wanted to forget. But now, Lucian Moretti was here, and that feeling of safety was vanishing. He pointed to her brick building. "Third floor," she said. Lucian scanned it, instantly spotting security flaws she never saw. He noted the weak front door lock and the fire escape on the back. Fire escapes are an open invitation for trouble, he said, already walking toward the entrance. Inside, her apartment was small and tidy. It was filled with thrift store furniture that screamed, "I am not staying long." Lucian examined every inch, and Nora felt defensive about her modest life. The locks are a joke, he stated flatly. A teenager could get through these windows. No one is trying to break in, she shot back. Not yet, he replied, turning to face her. But if the wrong people learn about our baby, they will use him to get to me. His casual tone made her stomach turn. You are just trying to scare me. I am being honest, he said, stepping closer. You think leaving Boston made you safe, but it did not. The only thing protecting you is that nobody knows you are important to me. Once they do, you become a target. Then you should stay away, she pleaded. Maybe the safest thing for our son is for you to be gone. A flash of pain crossed his face. Is that what you want? For me to pretend he does not exist? I want him to be safe, she said, her voice breaking. That is all I have ever wanted. Lucian cupped her face in his hands. You cannot hide from my world. Our son carries my blood, which makes him a part of it. The only choice you have is whether he faces that world with his father's protection or without it. Tears welled in her eyes. That is not fair. No, he agreed softly. It is not. But it is the truth. She wanted to argue, to insist she could protect their son on her own, but the look in his eyes told her he was right. I hate this, she whispered. I hate that you are right. She trailed off, unable to say the words. A criminal? A killer? He finished for her, his voice full of self-hatred. I know what I am, Nora. But I am also a man who loves his son enough to tear down his own empire to give that boy a better life. Does that not count for something? His thumbs gently wiped away her tears. I am his father, and I will do whatever it takes to protect him. His raw honesty broke through her anger. The Lucian Moretti she knew never showed weakness, but here he was just a man terrified of failing his child. 1 week, she said, her voice a faint whisper. Give me 1 week to think. No pressure and no surprise visits. Then we will talk. He agreed instantly. But I am upgrading your locks tomorrow, and my security team stays. That is not negotiable. Fine. He leaned in and pressed his lips to her forehead. The gesture was so tender it made her heart ache. Take care of yourself, he murmured. Both of you. And then he was gone. The week that followed was a blur. Nora went to work at the bookstore, pretending everything was fine, but she was constantly looking over her shoulder. Sure enough, she came home on Tuesday to new deadbolts that belonged on a bank vault. On Wednesday, a new encrypted phone arrived. On Thursday, a full security system with cameras was installed overnight. She should have been furious, but she remembered his warnings about the fire escape and weak locks. It was easier to just accept his protection. Her boss, Margaret, knew something was wrong. You have been jumpy all week, honey, she said, handing Nora a coffee. Want to tell me what is going on? Nora held the warm cup, deciding how much to share. The baby's father found me, she admitted. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. Were you not going to tell him? It is complicated, Nora sighed. He wants to be involved. He hurt me, Margaret. He lied about who he was, and when I found out, I ran. Now he says he is changing for our baby, and I want to believe him, but I am so scared. Margaret listened patiently, her eyes full of wisdom. Can I tell you something I have learned from 50 years of watching people? She asked gently. Please. Everyone deserves a chance to change, but not everyone earns the right to be believed. The real question is not whether he can change. The question is, are you willing to risk being wrong about him a second time? What if I trust him and he hurts our son the way he hurt me? Then you set boundaries and you protect your child. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. But hiding is not protecting your son, honey. It is protecting yourself. Nora knew Margaret was right. Her fear was not just for the baby. It was about getting her own heart broken again. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. You learn as you go, Margaret said, squeezing her hand, but you have to be willing to try. That night, Nora made her decision. She picked up the encrypted phone he had given her and dialed the only number in it. Lucian answered immediately. Is everything all right? I want to meet, she said, her voice steady. Tomorrow. We need to talk about what comes next. She agreed to meet him at Roger Williams Park. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about finding a way to be parents without destroying each other. Nora knew this was a massive risk. But what if second chances were real? The answer to that question could either save them or ruin them completely. She had to decide if she was willing to try, and for her son, the answer had to be yes. She found a quiet bench by the water, her hands resting on her belly where the baby was kicking. She wondered if he could feel her anxiety. Lucian arrived exactly at noon. He was dressed in jeans and a leather jacket, an awkward attempt to look casual for a man who radiated power. Two other men watched from a distance. You brought bodyguards to a park? Nora asked as he sat down. I bring them everywhere, he replied, gesturing to the men. You just usually do not notice them. That is not as comforting as you think, she said. Lucien looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He thanked her for coming. I almost canceled, she admitted honestly. A friend helped me see that I was making choices based on fear, not on what is best for our child. We need to find a way to coexist. But if we do this, it has to be on my terms. We are equal partners. No more secrets, no more you making decisions for me. We figure this out together, or not at all. He was quiet for a long moment. That is difficult for me. I am used to being in control. Then you need to learn a new way, she said, her voice firm. Because I have been doing just fine on my own for 6 months. The question is, Can you accept a partner? His hand covered hers on the bench, his grip desperate. I want to be a real father, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I want to be there for everything. I need to be the kind of father that I never had. The raw honesty in his voice broke through her defenses. Then prove it to me, she whispered. He took out his phone. I am getting out, Nora. For good. I have already signed over my main businesses. As of yesterday, I am no longer in control. He swiped the screen. And this is my agreement with federal prosecutors. I am giving them information on everyone. Corrupt police, judges, city officials, anyone who took my money to look the other way. The world seemed to stop for a moment. How much danger are you in? She asked. A lot, he said, not hiding the truth. There are people who would kill me for this, but they do not know about you or the baby. You will be safe, I promise. He squeezed her hand, his eyes locking onto hers. It will all be over by the end of January. Everything will be finished. He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. Right around the time our son is born. What if you are not? He calmly explained the backup plan. You and the baby vanish. My clean money goes into a trust for him, and you raise him somewhere safe, with more than enough to live a good life. I do not want your money, Lucian. I want our son to have a father, she whispered, her voice cracking. I want to believe the man I fell for was real, not just a mask. He was, Lucian said, his thumb gently wiping away her tear. Everything I felt for you was real, Nora. The only lie was the empire I was building in the shadows. I do love you. The words escaped her lips before she could stop them. And I hate that I do. Seeing you makes me want things I can't have. It feels like coming home, but I know how dangerous that is. He kissed her with a gentle desperation, and she kissed him back, ignoring every voice that screamed it was a mistake. When they parted, breathless, she rested her head on his. This doesn't solve anything, she whispered. I know, he said, kissing her temple. But it is a start. A sudden, hard kick from the baby made her gasp, a sharp reminder that time was marching on. He is active today, she said, placing Lucian's hand on her belly. A look of pure wonder replaced the hardness in his eyes. Does it hurt? He asked, his voice soft. Sometimes. He likes to kick right when I'm trying to sleep. My mother said I was the same way, he recalled. She would walk the floors at 3 a.m. just to keep me settled. The mention of his mother was a surprise. Will she want to meet him? Nora asked. A shadow crossed his face. My mother died 6 years ago. Cancer. I am so sorry. She would have loved you, he said, his hand still on her stomach. She always wanted grandchildren to spoil. And your father? He died long before her, Lucian said, his voice flat. He made enemies, and one of them caught up to him. I was 15. I came home from school and found him on the kitchen floor. He told me to run before they came back for me. That is not the life I want for our son, she said quietly. I do not want him to think violence is the answer. Neither do I, Lucian promised, his hand pressing gently on her stomach. That is why I am getting out, Nora. I refuse to watch my son make my mistakes. I will not see him become a man who thinks murder is a business solution. People like you do not change overnight. No, they do not, he agreed. Change is hard, but I will do the work so my son does not have to. The baby kicked again, as if he understood. Nora felt a wall inside her begin to crumble. I want to believe you, she said. Then believe, he replied, lifting her hand to his lips. Give me a chance to prove it. Just then, a bodyguard approached, his face urgent. Lucian's entire demeanor shifted, the tender father vanishing, replaced by a dangerous crime boss. What is it? He snapped. There has been an incident at the warehouse. 3 men are dead. The police are asking questions, and the ownership papers still have your name on them. Nora felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of incident? The kind that makes the news, Lucian said grimly, already pulling out his phone. I have to handle this. Michael will take you home. Wait, she said, grabbing his hand. What is happening? Someone is trying to make sure I cannot leave this life, he explained. How big of a problem is this? He looked at her, his expression serious. Big enough that you need to be prepared. Fear seized her. Lucian, listen to me. He cupped her face, his touch urgent. If I do not contact you in 48 hours, there is an envelope taped under your bathroom sink. It has everything you need to disappear. Do you understand? He kissed her one last time, a quick, desperate touch. I love you, he said. Then he was gone, striding toward a black car. The bodyguard, Michael, approached her gently. Ma'am, I should take you home. Tell me the truth, she demanded. He hesitated. There was a hit at the warehouse. It was not about drugs. It was a message. What message? That Lucian Moretti does not get to just walk away, Michael said. The people he is testifying against will not go down without a fight. We need to go. You are not safe out here. Nora allowed him to lead her to the car, her mind spinning. 3 men dead. A message written in blood. The violent world she tried to escape was catching up to them, and she feared it was moving too fast. She was supposed to be setting boundaries, not admitting she still loved him. Now, he was walking into a situation that could get him killed, and she was left waiting. A wave of nausea, not from pregnancy but from pure terror, sent her running to the bathroom. The fear of losing him was overwhelming. When the sickness passed, her trembling hands reached under the sink. There was the envelope, just as he had said. For a moment she hesitated. Opening it would make the danger real. But she had to know. Inside were passports, dizzying bank account numbers, and a list of contacts in different cities. But it was the handwritten letter that broke her. Nora, if you are reading this, I am either gone or in custody. I am so sorry I dragged you into my world and put you in this danger. Please know, none of this is your fault. You fell in love with a man you did not know, and by the time you learned the truth, it was too late. I brought this darkness into your life. The information here will help you disappear. Take our son and go far away. Change your names, your lives, everything. When he is old enough, tell him I was a good man who made bad choices, and that I loved him more than anything. Or tell him nothing. That might be easier for him. The choice is yours. The people I have listed will help you. They are loyal to me and will protect you. I love you, Nora. You were the only good thing in my dark life. If I could do it all over, I would do it differently. Since I cannot, I can only make sure my mistakes do not destroy you both. Be safe, be happy, and try to remember the man who loved you. Nora finally let the tears fall, hot and unstoppable. She now understood the true weight he was carrying, the impossible choice he was making for their future. A kick from the baby brought her back to the present. She pressed a hand to her belly, promising to protect him no matter what. Then came the waiting, the hardest part of all. Hours crawled by with no news. She could not eat or sleep, her mind spinning with terrible possibilities. At midnight, her phone finally rang. She answered, her hand shaking. It is me. Lucian's exhausted voice came through. I am okay. The situation is handled. Relief washed over her, so strong she almost collapsed. We need to talk, he said, his tone heavy. Things are moving faster than I planned. Can you come to Boston tomorrow? Every part of her wanted to say no, to stay where she felt safe. But safety was an illusion. I will be there, she said quietly. Lucian, I found the envelope. I read your letter. After a moment of silence, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. And I am not running anymore, she declared. We face whatever is next together. Tomorrow, she interrupted, stopping him before he could argue. Just tell me when and where. After they hung up, Nora sat alone, wondering if she had just made the bravest or the most foolish decision of her life. The 90-minute drive to Boston was filled with rain and anxiety. Nora was walking back into the world she had fled 6 months ago, pregnant with Lucian's child, and filled with a mix of fear and hope. Her son deserved parents who could try to work together, not fight from opposite sides of a courtroom. The address Lucian gave her was not a fancy penthouse. Instead, her driver, Michael, pulled up to a normal brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. It was the kind of building where families lived, with a child's bicycle chained to the fence. "He is on the third floor," Michael said, opening her door. "I will be right here." 7 months pregnant, Nora felt a familiar panic rise as she knocked on the apartment door marked 3B. Lucian opened it instantly, the exhaustion on his face replaced by sheer relief. "You came," he breathed, pulling her inside a sparsely furnished apartment. He bolted 3 locks behind her. "What is this place?" she asked. "A safe house," he explained. "Completely off the grid and untraceable. I needed to know you were safe." Lucian sat across from her, his expression grim. "The attack yesterday was orchestrated by Vincent Caruso. He's a rival I'm testifying against." He explained that Caruso had framed him for murder, trying to destroy his credibility as a federal witness. The police had nearly arrested him. "It was a close call, Nora. The plan almost worked." "But you are not arrested," she stated. "Not yet," he said, leaning in. "But Caruso is not finished. That is why I brought you here. He knows about you." The room seemed to tilt. "How?" Nora whispered, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "I don't know," Lucian admitted, his voice raw with anguish. "I was so careful, but he is resourceful, and it is only a matter of time before he finds out exactly who you are." "So what are my options?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear. He laid them out. The first option was for her to disappear. He could get her a new name and a new life in another country, with enough money to raise their son comfortably. But she would have to go alone. The second option was for her to stay with him, right there in Boston. "It is dangerous," he warned. "But we would be together. Our son would know his father, and if Caruso wants you, he has to go through me first." A strange sense of understanding settled over her. Lucian's dangerous nature was precisely what could keep them safe. "If I stay," she said, "we do this right. No more secrets." He immediately agreed, moving to sit beside her. "Full transparency. We are partners in this." His hand found hers. "I want to be there for all of it, Nora. The good, the bad, and the middle of the night feedings." "How long until you are clear of all this?" she asked. 6 weeks, if everything goes perfectly," he answered, squeezing her hand. "I know that cuts it close to your due date, but it is the only way." He looked into her eyes. "I think our son deserves parents who are united. I love you, Nora. I will do whatever it takes to protect our family, even if it means becoming the man I promised to leave behind. For years, I broke every rule I was ever taught. To my old world, I am a traitor, but I will betray them 1,000 times if it means our son has a father." Nora felt the truth in his words and finally leaned into him. He held her carefully, his hands trembling. She whispered, "I am scared." He replied, "So am I. But if everything falls apart, we will rebuild it together. No more running alone, Nora. We are a team now." She wanted to believe him, but letting go of the fear that had been her shield for 6 months felt impossible. "I will stay," she finally said. "But if Caruso gets close, I am taking our son and disappearing." Lucian agreed. He promised to have her things brought from Providence and offered her the second bedroom, which would soon be their baby's nursery. The thought of them living together, playing house while his entire world burned down, was strange. He showed her the small apartment. It had 2 tiny bedrooms, an old kitchen, and a bathroom that looked like it was from the 1970s. This was nothing like the luxury penthouse they once shared, but it felt more like a real home than a beautiful cage. Lucian opened the door to the smaller room. "The baby's room," he said softly. "I know it is not much, but we can fix it up." Nora stepped inside, trying to imagine their son sleeping there. It felt surprisingly right, like they were building something real in the middle of all the chaos. "We will need to go shopping," she said, thinking of all the baby supplies they needed in a hurry. Make a list, he said, watching her. I will have it all here this week, but you need to rest. You have been traveling, and the stress is not good for the baby. The gentle command, the permission to finally not be strong, almost broke her. She sank to the floor, her hands on her belly where the baby was moving. I do not know how to do this, she confessed. How to be pregnant and terrified and in love with a man who might get us killed. Lucian sat beside her, their shoulders touching. You do it one day at a time, he said, taking her hand. And you do it knowing I am right here with you, facing the same fears. She leaned her head on his shoulder, choosing to believe him, just for a moment. In the following weeks, their life became a strange mix of preparing for a baby and dismantling an empire. Nora unpacked her boxes, creating a shared home in the safe house. They fell into a routine of quiet mornings and shared dinners, always under the 24-hour watch of their guards. Every day, Lucian took another step away from his past. He spent hours on the phone with lawyers and federal agents, slowly breaking down the organization he had spent 15 years building. Nora saw the toll it took on him. He would return from meetings looking exhausted, but he always found the energy to ask about her day and feel their baby kick. One evening, they struggled to assemble the baby's crib. The instructions made no sense. This is ridiculous, she said with a laugh. You have managed million-dollar criminal operations, but you cannot build a simple crib. He smiled, the stress momentarily gone. Those operations had better instructions, and I usually had people for this sort of thing. She softened, running a hand through his hair. Well, you are going to be a hands-on father now. You better get used to it. His smile faded, replaced by a look of vulnerability. Is that what I'm going to be? He asked. A hands-on father? If you want to be, she said gently. You have been here every single day. You come to doctor's appointments and help me pick out clothes. That is what hands-on fathers do. He admitted, I am terrified I will mess it up, that my past will make me a bad father. She cupped his face, making him look at her. I am scared too. I am 26 years old and have no idea what I'm doing, but we will figure it out together. We will make mistakes, and we will learn. He kissed her then, a slow, deep kiss that held all the feelings they had been avoiding for weeks. The attraction between them had never faded, and living together had only made it stronger. Nora, he murmured against her lips. We should not. She kissed him back. Why not? She asked. We are adults having a baby together. Why should we pretend we do not still want each other? He asked her later at his apartment. Because you need to be able to leave if something goes wrong, she answered. I do not want you to stay because you feel obligated, or just because we are sleeping together again. Is that what you think of me? That I would stay for sex? She said, insulted. I am here because our son deserves to have both of his parents, and because, despite everything, I still believe you can change. Then why did you bring it up? He asked. Because I am tired of pretending. I am tired of dancing around the fact that I still love you, even when I know I should not. I am tired of sleeping alone in the next room when all I want is to be in your arms. Her voice broke. I have been alone for 6 months, Lucian. I am so tired of being alone. He stood and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her with a desperate passion that matched her own. If we do this, he whispered, we do it for real, no more pretending. I love you, Nora. I have always loved you. Then stop pretending, she said, and led him toward the bedroom. Imagine being forced to live in hiding, pregnant and in love with a man whose past could get you both killed. That was Nora's world. This story is about escaping a dark past to build a future. But what would you risk for a fresh start? For months, Nora and Lucian had shared a bed, but not each other, separated by fear. That night, their reunion was tender and intense, a silent promise in a world of uncertainty. Lying in his arms afterward, with their baby kicking between them, Nora felt a fragile peace. This quiet moment was everything she wanted. Lucian noticed her smile and asked what she was thinking. She admitted it felt strange to be happy amidst all the chaos. He kissed her, saying it was not strange, It was human. Joy is something you have to find wherever you can. 3 hours later, a phone call shattered their peace. Nora watched Lucian transform back into the guarded man she first met. He changed into his clothes with practiced speed. The news was grim. Their enemy, Caruso, had tried to harm a federal prosecutor. Lucian was already on the phone, his voice sharp with command as he organized his team. He explained the attack failed, but it changed everything. Caruso's desperate act had just fast-tracked the entire legal case against him. The federal authorities were now moving to make immediate arrests, forcing everyone to show their hand. He looked at her, his expression serious. He told her to pack an emergency bag with everything essential and to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. The cold grip of fear tightened around her. He saw her terror and cupped her face, promising to keep her and their son safe. All she had to do was trust him completely. He gave her a quick, hard kiss and was gone, leaving Nora alone with his bodyguard, a silent man named Michael, and the restless baby inside her. Nora packed a bag, her hands trembling. She included clothes, medical records, and the precious ultrasound photos of their son. She stayed awake all night, jumping at every noise, her anxiety mirrored by the constant movement of the baby. Lucian finally came back at 3 in the morning. He looked completely exhausted, but his eyes held a look of victory. He told her it was over. Federal agents had arrested Caruso 2 hours earlier for the attempted murder of a federal official. The man who had haunted their lives was going to prison for a very, very long time. Relief washed over Nora so powerfully that she began to shake. Lucian sat beside her, looking all of his 38 years. He explained that with Caruso gone, his old associates were rushing to make deals with the prosecutors. In 3 weeks, his testimony would be finished, and he would be a free man, with no ties left to his criminal past. It was supposed to be 3 more weeks. Lucian held Nora, his body trembling with relief. He promised her a quiet future, a normal life raising their son, free from the criminal world they were desperate to escape. It all sounded like a dream. Nora chose to believe him, whispering, "We can survive 3 more weeks." But their son had other plans. At 4 in the morning, a pain like a tightening vice around her stomach woke her up. She tried to dismiss it, but when a second wave hit even harder, she knew. This was real. "Lucien," she said, her voice shaking. "Wake up." He was instantly alert, a skill learned from a life where vulnerability was a weakness. "I think I am in labor." The words settled in the quiet room before he sprang into action, pulling on clothes and grabbing his phone. He was all business. "How far apart are the contractions? When did they start?" Nora breathed through another wave of pain. "It's too early, Lucian. I am only 36 weeks. But babies arrive on their own schedule." He was already on the phone, arranging the car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of fear and pain, with contractions coming every 8 minutes. "You are having a baby today," the nurse announced cheerfully. But Nora was terrified. She gripped Lucian's hand, her knuckles white. "He's not ready. His lungs aren't developed." A calm doctor appeared, assuring her that babies born at 36 weeks usually do just fine. The hospital room was a chaos of beeping machines and constant interruptions. Through it all, Lucian was her anchor. "I am scared," she admitted. "I am scared too," he said, his touch gentle. "But he is going to be fine. He is strong, just like his mother." The hours passed in waves of escalating pain. Nora thought she was prepared, but nothing could match this intensity. Lucian never left her side. When she screamed, he encouraged her. When she felt like giving up, he held her. "I cannot do this," she gasped. "It is too much." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Yes, you can. You are the woman who survived loving me. You can survive anything." She wanted to laugh, but another contraction hit, and she could only hold his hand and believe him. By early afternoon, the final, critical phone call came. "It is my lawyer," Lucian said, his face tense. "The final transfer." This was it, the call that would secure their freedom. "Go," she told him, even as her heart begged him to stay. I will be fine. He kissed her desperately. I will be back in 10 minutes. Do not have the baby without me. But 20 minutes after he left, her water broke. 25 minutes later, the doctor told her it was time to push. We have to wait, Nora pleaded. The doctor shook her head gently. I am afraid your son has other ideas. In that moment, she realized she might have to do this alone. A fierce determination took over. Okay, she thought, let us do this. Pushing was the hardest thing she had ever done. I can see the head, the doctor announced. One more big push. Suddenly, the door flew open. Lucian rushed in, phone still in his hand, his eyes wild with panic and relief. I am here. I am sorry. Tears filled her eyes. You made it. He was by her side instantly, taking her hand. Always. The world narrowed to just the three of them, and with one final incredible effort, their son was born. A cry, high and perfect, cut through the air. A doctor announced it was a boy, but they already knew. Nora felt them place the tiny baby on her chest, his dark hair damp against her skin. Love, so fierce it was almost painful, cracked her heart wide open. She saw tears streaming down Lucian's face, his usual control completely gone. He reached out a trembling hand, and when their son's tiny fingers wrapped around his, Lucian's entire expression changed. He's perfect, he whispered. He's ours. The nurse asked for a name. Nora looked at Lucian and said softly, Theo. It means gift, and that is exactly what he is. A gift they desperately needed. As they held their son, Lucian's phone buzzed. His face shifted. It is done, he said. The final transfer went through at 2:15. Everything from my old life is gone. He looked at Theo, sleeping in Nora's arms. He was born just 12 days before my deadline. 12 days before I would have run out of time. Their son had arrived at the exact moment his father escaped his criminal past. Now, Lucian said, we go home and build the life we have been fighting for. The first few days were a blur of learning how to be parents. They learned to change diapers, to soothe cries, and to function on 2-hour stretches of sleep. Nora fell more in love with Theo every single moment. 3 months later, they were living in a quiet neighborhood full of young families. Lucian started a legitimate real estate company, using his skills to build something honest. He was home for dinner every night, a constant presence in Theo's life. Seeing Lucian with his son Theo was a complete surprise. This man, who had built a brutal empire, held his baby as if he were made of delicate glass. He spoke to him in soft whispers, terrified of making a single mistake. When a social worker visited, Lucian turned on his famous charm. But this time, it was not for manipulation. It was the genuine plea of a father trying to prove he could provide a safe home. The social worker asked about his job. Lucian explained he was moving from import and export into real estate. He conveniently left out that his old business was a criminal enterprise. Nora added that while her own family was not involved, she and Lucian were a team, ready to raise their son together. After the social worker approved their plan, Lucian shared some news with Nora in the quiet of the hospital room. He told her the federal trials were set for February. He would have to testify, but his lawyer believed it would all be over by March. Then, their old life would truly be finished. There would be no more looking over their shoulders, no more fear. Nora asked him what kind of future he wanted to build. He smiled in the dark and said he wanted a boring one. The kind of life where their biggest problem was deciding on a preschool. A life where violence was just a story on the news, not a part of their reality. Nora agreed that it sounded perfect. They finally brought Theo home on a chilly December afternoon. That first night was much harder than the hospital. Theo woke up every 90 minutes, his cries echoing in the small apartment. Nora would feed him while an anxious Lucian paced the floor, asking if she needed anything. By 4 in the morning, they were both delirious with exhaustion. Nora started laughing. She looked at Lucian and said that just 3 weeks ago, they were escaping a criminal empire. Now they were just two tired parents trying to keep a tiny baby alive. She yawned and called the whole situation a miracle. The days slowly turned into weeks as they settled into a routine. Lucian dedicated himself to being a father with the same focus he once used for his criminal work. He read every book he could find on raising a healthy, happy baby. Christmas passed in a quiet blur of feeding and changing diapers. But as the day of his testimony approached, Nora could feel his old tension returning. One night, he asked her what would happen if something went wrong. He worried that his testimony would not be enough, or that the government would decide he was too dangerous to be free. Nora reminded him that he had done everything they asked. She told him to have faith. The night before his court appearance, Lucian could not sleep. Nora found him standing over Theo's crib, his face filled with a heartbreaking fear. He finally confessed that he was terrified of failing his son. He worried that after all his sacrifices, he would still end up being a father who destroyed his child's life. Nora took his hand and told him to look at their son. Theo was safe and loved because of the hard choices Lucian had made. She told him he was enough, not because of power or money, but because he was a father who loved his son and showed up every single day. That, she said, is all any child ever needs. His testimony took 6 long hours. When Lucian finally walked through the door that afternoon, Nora knew from the look on his face that everything was okay. He simply said, "It's done." The relief in his voice was overwhelming. He explained that the prosecutors were satisfied and that his lawyer believed he was completely in the clear. He was finally free. That night, they celebrated with takeout from a local Italian restaurant. As Theo slept peacefully, they toasted to their new beginning. Nora leaned her head on Lucian's shoulder and asked him what they would do now. He kissed her forehead and said, "Now we live." The old life truly ended when news broke that Lucian's former associates were sentenced to decades in prison. His name was mentioned, but he was already yesterday's news. He had saved himself, but more importantly, he had saved his family. He was becoming a good man, a loving father, and a devoted partner. He was proving every day that he was better than the man he used to be. On Theo's first birthday, they threw a party in their backyard. That night, after everyone had gone home, Lucian pulled a small box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a silver bracelet with a tiny footprint charm. "It is Theo's footprint from the hospital," he said, fastening it on her wrist. Tears filled her eyes. "You gave me a second chance, Nora. You gave me a son who made me want to be better. I will spend my life trying to be worthy of that gift." "You already are," she whispered. "Then marry me," he said, his voice full of hope. "Marry me because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life as Theo's father and your husband." She had known it was coming, but hearing the words made her heart leap. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They married in a small courthouse ceremony with their son as the only witness. It was not a fairy tale wedding, but it was perfect. It was two people who had fought their way out of the darkness and were promising to choose each other every single day for the rest of their lives. 5 years later, their life was beautifully and wonderfully ordinary. Their son, Theo, was now a curious 5-year-old boy who loved trucks. Lucian's legitimate business was a success, and Nora worked part-time at a local bookstore. Their days were filled with bike rides, trips to the zoo, and family movie nights. They had built a life together, piece by piece, leaving the darkness far behind them. On Theo's 5th birthday, Nora found Lucian in their son's room late at night, just watching him sleep. She wrapped her arms around his waist and asked what he was thinking. He marveled at how different life was. 5 years ago, he was a key witness, fearing for his life. Now, he was just a father, worrying if his son was ready for kindergarten. Nora kissed his shoulder. She told him he was not just anything. He was everything to them. "You were a monster, but you chose to be a good man for our son." Lucian held his wife, Nora, feeling the weight of his violent past. He had built a criminal empire, but all he wanted now was to protect their child, Theo, from that darkness. He worried his past would always define him. Nora understood his fear. She promised that when Theo was old enough, they would explain everything. They would tell him how his father fought to become someone worthy of a family. They believed love could erase the sins of the past, giving them a future they never thought possible. Years later, that day arrived. Lucian sat with his 8-year-old son and told him the unvarnished truth. He spoke of the fear he commanded and the terrible things he had done before Theo was born. He made no excuses. Theo listened with a serious expression. After a long silence, he looked at his father. He did not ask about the violence or the power. Instead, he asked a simple question. He wanted to know if changing was something you did just once, or if it was something you had to do every single day. The question hit Lucian with incredible force. He realized his wise young son understood the core of his struggle. Lucian explained that yes, every day he tried to be a better man than he was the day before. He did it for Theo, for Nora, and for himself. Theo nodded, satisfied with the answer. Then, he broke the serious mood by asking if they could still get ice cream like his dad had promised. Lucian laughed, the heaviness lifting instantly. This was his life now. A beautiful, simple existence focused on promises of ice cream, not criminal dealings. That night, Lucian told Nora about the conversation. She held him close and reminded him that he was not the only one who had to change. She had to learn how to trust again. She had to believe that love was worth the risk of getting hurt. Every day, when she looked at him and Theo, she chose to believe in hope over fear. They had both given each other a second chance. Together, they had built a small, quiet life that felt like a miracle. Their home was a safe place, far from the shadows of his former life. Lucian Moretti once built an empire on blood and fear. But that empire was nothing more than a bad memory. He had traded it all for a family built on love, sacrifice, and the daily choice to be a good man. As he lay next to his wife, with his son sleeping safely down the hall, he knew which legacy truly mattered. The power he once had was meaningless. The love he had now was everything. He had finally become a man, worthy of the second chance that had saved his soul. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.